Imagine this. You're alone and you're driving down the road on a rainy night when all of a sudden you sense that somebody is watching you. You choose to just ignore the feeling and then you keep on driving. When out of the corner of your eye you see a woman in a white dress and she's begging you to stop. Would you stop? The legend of the vanishing hitchhiker may have existed since the days of horse-drawn carriages. Sometimes the apparition may even claim to know the future of the driver, or maybe something that will happen in the world in the future, and then the ghosts will just disappear. During an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, Robert Stack said this about Chicago's most famous ghost, Resurrection Mary, the hitchhiking ghost of Archer Avenue. He said, "Tonight, the mysteries of love lost and love found, sometimes when you least expect it. Around Chicago, she's known as Resurrection Mary, a pale, mysterious young woman who has teased and beguiled the city for more than half a century. Some say she is nothing more than the product of overactive imagination. Others are certain there is more to this ghostly beauty than meets the eye. Some people seriously believe in the legend, and they believe that it originates from the story of a girl who died in a car accident on Archer Avenue in the 1930s, while others believe that it's simply an example of the vanishing hitchhiker urban legend. Chicago is home to many, many ghost stories and eerie places. You have the legend of Candyman, the site of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, H.H. Holmes and his murder castle, the Chicago Water Tower, the Drake Hotel, and the Devil Baby of Hull House, just to name a few. But our story takes place 20 minutes southwest of Chicago in a tiny village called Justice. Hundreds of people have seen her, dozens have danced with her, and a handful of men have even claimed that they've kissed her. The story of Resurrection Mary has different origins and it depends on who's telling the story, but the most popular version says that she died one winter night in 1934. She and a boyfriend were out dancing when they got into an argument. So because they got into an argument, she leaves and she takes off walking home on Archer Avenue. Now this is when she was hit by an out-of-control car and she was killed instantly. This happened right in front of Resurrection Cemetery. It was a hit and run. The driver never stopped. Mary was buried in the same gown and shoes that she wore the night that she died. She's said to be buried at Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, Illinois, hence her name, Resurrection Mary. She is described as a young, pretty, blonde woman no older than her mid-20s, and she wears a white ball gown. Most of the people that encounter her say that she hardly says anything and she's ice cold to the touch. She only appears at night, and the majority of sightings are reported by men, which tends to be common with female vanishing hitchhiking ghosts. She tends to be seen on a stretch of road between the cemetery and what was once known as the O. Henry Ballroom, later renamed the Willowbrook Ballroom. According to the legend, the first known report of Resurrection Mary was by Jerry Palis in 1939. Jerry was someone that loved to dance, and he was at the ballroom one night when he became captivated by a young blonde woman, and he asked her to dance. He didn't learn much about her because, as I said earlier, she rarely speaks, but he did learn her name and that she lived on the south side of town. They danced all night, and once it was time to leave, Jerry offered Mary a ride home. He said, as we walked along the street, she says, "Well, you might as well take me down to Archer Road." He didn't understand because that isn't the address that she gave him. That's not where she said she lived. She just kept saying, "No, I want to go out to Archer Road." So Jerry took her there and he stopped in front of Resurrection Cemetery. He let her out of the car and he said that she just vanished. He still wanted to know more about her, so the next day he drove to the house where she said that she lived. The woman that answered the door told him that no one lived there that matched that description that he gave, and it was then that he saw Mary's picture hanging on the wall. She had been dead for 5 years. It's then, Jerry said, that he understood why the woman that he was dancing with that night was ice cold. He had worked in a funeral home for a while, and he said that it was the touch of a corpse. Another story about Resurrection Mary says an elderly man from Chicago named Vince once met Resurrection Mary. He said that he was still spooked when he talked about that encounter 5 decades later. He said that he was out driving on Archer Avenue with the top down on his convertible. It was a warm Saturday night. So once he arrived at the ballroom, he saw a pretty blonde girl in a white dress. He asked her to dance and he said that she smiled. The band was loudly playing Boogie Woogie and Jeepers Creepers, so Vince didn't get much of a chance to talk to her. Once they were able to talk, he found out her name and that she lived on Damon Avenue in the Brighton Park neighborhood, which wasn't far from where he lived. He said as they danced, he began to notice how her skin was cold and brittle, but he said that didn't stop him from dancing with her the rest of the night. And after the final song, Vince offered Mary a ride home. But after they had driven a few miles, she asked him to stop outside of the locked gates of Resurrection Cemetery. He was confused, but he stopped anyway. As she opened the car door, she said, "I have to go and you can't follow me." She then walked towards the gates, placed a hand on the chain that locked the gates together, and she disappeared. Vince spent the rest of the night driving up and down Archer Avenue looking for Mary. He drove until the sun came up. When the cemetery gates opened for the day, he drove through the rows of tombstones engraved with crosses and angels. He didn't see Mary anywhere, so he decided to drive to the address that she had given him. Vince rang the doorbell and a middle-aged woman answered. She looked a bit shocked when Vince asked, "Is Mary home?" She said, "Mary doesn't live here anymore. She died in a car accident 4 years ago. Who are you?" Vince said he made up a story that he knew Mary from high school, but that he had gone away to college and had just moved back to Chicago. Behind Mary's mother, on top of a piano, he saw a picture of the girl that he had danced with the night before. It was definitely Mary. Her mother went on to tell him that Mary had gone dancing with some boys that she worked with, but they never made it to the dance hall. One of the boys crashed the car and Mary was thrown through the windshield and she died on the way to the hospital. She told him that if he ever wanted to visit Mary's grave, that she was buried in Resurrection Cemetery. Vince never returned to the O. Henry Ballroom or Resurrection Cemetery. For decades, Mary went unseen, but in the 1970s she reappeared during renovations of the cemetery and reports of her increased significantly. In 1973, Mary is said to have shown up at least twice in 1 month at a dance club called Harlow's, and the address was 8058 South Cicero Avenue, and she wore a dress that looked like a faded wedding gown. A manager there described her as having big spoolie curls coming down from her forehead. She was really pale, like she had powdered her face and her body. She was also dancing alone in an off-the-wall fashion. Yet, despite bouncers carting all of the guests, no one ever saw her come in or leave. In 1980, a lady named Claire and her husband Mark were driving down Archer Avenue and saw a woman in white slowly walking on the side of the road. The woman appeared translucent and she had a glowing white aura around her. When Claire and Mark turned around for a closer look, the woman was gone. In 1989, a woman named Janet and her friend were driving near Resurrection Cemetery in the evening when a woman in a white gown jumped out in front of Janet's car. She panicked. She didn't have time to react and she hit the woman. There was no impact and no sound. The woman had simply vanished. In the 90s, the owner of Chet's Melody Lounge was pulling out of the driveway when he saw a man running up the road frantically waving him down. He said, "I need to use your phone." He said that I hit a woman back there, but I can't find her body. The owner asked if she was a blonde woman in a white dress. The guy was like, "How did you know?" He said that was Resurrection Mary. "Don't worry, you didn't hit anyone. You saw a ghost." An author named Susan Stursberg wanted to have an encounter of her own, and this is what she said once she met Mary. "I was out with a friend one night who had just bought a new car. I hadn't been to Archer Avenue and was itching to go, so we decided to take a drive. First, we stopped to see her boyfriend who was playing in a band at a nearby suburban bar. We said hello, told him we were going for a drive, but we didn't tell him where. So we proceeded to Chet's Melody Lounge, talked to the regulars, played the ballad of Resurrection Mary on the jukebox, and played some pool. And when 2 a.m. rolled around, we drove to the cemetery gates, parked, and looked in. We started to get a case of the creeps. On the way home, we joked about giving Mary a ride in the new car. Later that night, my friend Kristen dropped me off at my apartment. As her boyfriend Mike heard the car pull up, he peeked out the window. Then, not wanting to appear worried and waiting up, he dropped the shade. Kristen let herself in and closed the door. Mike asked, "Where's Susan?" Kristen told him that she had dropped me off first. He asked, "Well, who was that in the car with you?" To this day, he swears that when he looked out the window, he saw a pale face look back at him from the passenger side of the front seat. With regards to Archer Avenue, some believe that the paranormal occurrences that take place there are because of the heightened energy that is caused by the surrounding bodies of water. Some believe that it is because of magnetic lines in the earth or ley lines, while others believe it has to do with the Native American remains that have supposedly been found along the road. So, who was Resurrection Mary? No one really knows, and it's a highly debated topic, but the late Richard Crowe, a ghost hunter and historian from the Chicago area, believed the ghost was a woman named Mary Burgovy. She suffered a skull fracture in a car accident in 1934. However, the accident wasn't near the cemetery. She was buried in an orchid-colored dress, and she had short, dark hair, not blonde. Here is a clip of Richard Crowe talking about Resurrection Mary.
The witnesses that I found are remarkably level-headed, and they're primarily blue-collar, middle-class types who have steady jobs and who have no other major claims to psychic encounters in their life.
Crowe is partly responsible for the popularity of Mary's legend. He began researching her story in the 70s, and he spent years investigating the legend. And over time, he interviewed dozens of witnesses who claimed to have encountered her. Even local police officers would call into radio shows with new sightings to add to Richard Crowe's files. Richard would often be on radio or TV shows during Halloween. He's also been on Oprah and Unsolved Mysteries. He passed away in 2012 and was also buried in Resurrection Cemetery. In 1999, a Chicago author made a possible connection to a lady named Anna Norquist. Her middle name I cannot pronounce, so I will spell it. It's Marija, and she died in a 1927 auto accident while on her way home from the O. Henry Ballroom. And that's a theory that has gained popularity in recent years. On August the 10th, in 1976, someone that was driving by the cemetery said that they noticed a girl grasping the bars of the cemetery and were worried that she was locked in, so they called the police. When the police arrived, they went all through the cemetery, but they didn't find anybody. They did, however, find that the rails of the fence were bent at sharp angles with 2 blackened scorch marks indicating where they had been pulled apart. The marks were in the shape of handprints and appeared to have the texture of human skin. Someone from the cemetery said that a truck had backed into the gate, and that is what caused the damage to them. After a crowd of people went to see the bars that they believed were touched by a ghost, they were removed to stop further crowds.